Hello everyone, my name is Burak Güzel and welcome to another episode of Codeigniter from scratch. In the previous episodes we have looked at existing libraries and helpers that come with the Codeigniter framework. Today we're going to do something different and we're going to actually create our own helpers and libraries. We're also going to extend the existing helpers and libraries that come with Codeigniter. So this way we'll able to extend the functionality of the framework, make it more flexible and add more custom utilities to it. Um, so let's just get started by installing Codeigniter. And I just took out the application folder out of the system folder, deleted the user guide folder, and put an htaccess file to remove index.php from my URLs, just like in the previous episodes. Um, and the next thing I'm going to do is just go to config.php to set my URL. And once that's out of the way, we're able to load the framework. So the first thing we're going to do is look at how to create helpers. If you look at the application folder and the system folder, both have helpers folders. Um, the one under the application folder has just an index.html file, which is just a blank do not access kind of page. Um, the system folder, however, has all the helper files. We use them when we load them. For example, if you load the URL helper in your code, the framework will load this URL underscore helper.php and make all of these functions in this file available to you. And these are all added to the scope of your script. So we, our custom helpers will work very similarly. We're going to create a helper file, but we're not going to touch anything under the system folder. We're just going to create these things under the application folder. And this also has an advantage because when you make changes to the system folder, it makes it harder to upgrade your Codeigniter installation later. So I'm going to create a helper named math helper. And if you notice that all helper files end with underscore helper, that's the standard. You have to use that. And the name of the helper is what comes before that. So this will be a simple helper, and I'm going to put just one function in it, and that's going to be for calculating the area of a circle by a given radius. And this returns a radius squared times pi, which is radius times radius times the function pi that returns the number pi. So now, besides all these helpers that Codeigniter comes with, we now have a math helper. And there's no math helper in Codeigniter. So now when we load, we can say this load helper math. So let's practice that in a test controller. Let's create a new test controller named test, which will be class test extends controller class as usual. Oops. And let's write a function here. Let's call it area of circle, just to name it a little differently. Now, if you go in your browser test area of circle, it should load a blank page. Well, we're expecting to pass a radius, so just put like a number and it should be blank. Now from here we're going to load the math helper. So we go this load helper math. And it's just simple as that. And now we have access to the circle area function. So we can get echo circle area radius. So let's put here a circle with radius has area that. Now, if you refresh this, you'll see a circle with radius 2 has area 12.566, etc. And if you put 3 or any kind of number, it will just calculate it. So as you can see, we created a helper, we loaded it just like usual, and we're able to call a function that's in the helper. And if you remember, helpers are just the collections of functions. They're not they don't have classes in them by by the standards of this framework. So let's see how we can extend an existing helper. I'm going to close this math helper and look at the helpers that come with the system folder. I want to look at the date helper. So now the date helper has a lot of functions, and I want a function that is related to dates but is not available in this helper, help or collection of functions. So I'm going to add a function to the date helper, but I'm not going to do that by changing this file. As I said, that makes it harder to upgrade Codeigniter. So I'm going to create my new function inside a file named date helper. So the same name as the original file, but under the application helpers folder. So name it just the same, and now you can add functions to it, and these functions get added to the date helper. So when you load the date helper, they become available. So I'm going to let's say I want a function that returns the date and time in the MySQL format. Let's call it date MySQL. If you're familiar with this, you know that it's like Y, capital Y dash M dash D space capital H I S. That returns the year, month, date, hour, minutes, seconds in the MySQL format. And you're gonna pass the time. Also, if the time is not given, we'll use the current time. Now we have a simple function that returns the date in the MySQL format, and I'm going to test this in my test controller by creating, let's say, show MySQL date, and I'm going to load the date helper. Now this loads both the original date helper and our new date helper, both files, and all the functions in both files combined become available. So I can call my new function from here, date MySQL. Let's see, current date in MySQL format. I call this show MySQL date. That's what I'm going to put in the URL. And you'll see current date in MySQL format is just like that. So far we learned how to create a new helper or how to extend an existing helper. Now we're going to do these things also with libraries. So we're going to create a new library. We're also going to learn how to extend an existing library. So let me close these helper files. So this is very similar. If you look at the application folder and system folder, you'll see that both have the libraries folders. And the application folder has an empty libraries folder, and the system folder has a quite full libraries folder. And these are some of the libraries we looked at previously, like the calendar, shopping cart, etc. They all come with here. Again, when we add a new library, we don't put it in the system folder, but we put it in the application folder, application/libraries folder. So I'm going to create a new PHP file, and this is going to be a test library. I'm just going to call it foo. Now the library files are capitalized. Just look at the system's libraries folder. You'll see that they're all capitalized like this. So we'll follow this format. And the class is named same as the file. So just say class foo, and now this doesn't extend anything. We don't extend model controller or whatever, anything like that. So it's a standalone class. So you might find any existing uh, class from another framework or any other utility and plug it in, probably quite easily, sometimes not, but so any standalone class will work here. So once you create a class here, then now you can add any methods. So I'm just going to add a test method, and let's say this test method, accepts some parameter, and it just prints it out. You passed me this. And now to load this new library we just created, we load it just like any other library that comes with Codeigniter. So let's create a controller method here called new library. This load library, just like usual, will work. Foo. And when the library is loaded, you access it by going this and the name of the library with lowercase. And I have a test method or function here, which I can just then call, which accepts a parameter. So I'll just pass bar and see what happens. This function was named new library, so I'm going to load it in the URL. So you passed me bar. So it is working. When creating a library, there's one important thing that you need to be aware of. Since this is sort of disconnected from the framework itself, it's not as trivial to use another library. So if your new library depends on an existing library, there's something you need to do. And for example, let's say you wanted to load the config library that comes with Codeigniter. Normally, from anywhere else, you might be able to do this load library config, and it would be loaded. But this time, it's going to just give you an error. The reason of that is this is referenced by going this, and this now references to foo, and there's no other base class that this extends. So it's expecting to see a load member here, but there's nothing like that in this class. So we need to find this loader from somewhere else. And for that, I'm going to show you a super Codeigniter object. I think that's the name. This super object is loaded by a special function. So I'm adding a constructor to my new class, and to load this super object into this CI, I'm going to have to call the function getInstance. Now, getInstance is part of Codeigniter. This function comes with it. And it returns the instance of this super object. And this object has to be referenced instead of cloned or copied. So that's why this is equal ampersand. It just references to that object instead of making a copy. And just to demonstrate that the constructor was called, I'm going to put this here, new line. Now this super object has the load function, the loader in it, just like when you're in the module or controller. Now we're able to do, I'm going to comment this out, and instead of that line, we're going to do this CI, which does have the load capability, and you can load a library just like this. And let's say I want to see my language setting. echo, because I'm just going to use this config library that I loaded. Your language is now to access this library, I still have to go to the CI and then the name of the library and then the function inside the library, and I just want the language. So this is this item is under the config library. We didn't cover the config library, but it's very simple. It just gets the configuration of your framework. So for example, now this foo class library we created has access to other libraries that come with Codeigniter this way by using the super object. So when you load this library by calling this load library foo, it will automatically call the constructor method, which will load the super object, and we'll see that it was called by, we're going to see this in the screen, and then you're able to load and do other Codeigniter stuff from other methods of this library. So let's load this and see what happens. Okay, now three things happened. The constructor was called, just like I said, and it loaded the super object, and then you pass me bar just like before, this line executed correctly, and then it was able to load the config library and read that setting, the language setting. Then it says your language is English. So that's how you can connect a new library to existing libraries, and how you can load other things. You can load helpers, similarly, libraries, plugins, etc. So now that we learned about how to create a new library class, we're going to learn how to extend an existing library that comes with Codeigniter. The library we're going to extend is the form validation library. And if you look at the system/libraries folder, you'll see there's a form validation.php file. And if you open that, you'll see a rather large class in this file, and we're going to be adding functionality to this class. So if you notice that the name of the class is CI underscore form validation. So this CI underscore prefix comes with all the core library classes, and we're going to have to extend this full name of this class. So I'm going to copy that name, just close this file, and we're going to create another library under the application/libraries folder. And this is going to be called my underscore form validation. Again, this is a prefix that's for extending the existing libraries, and that can be changed. If you go to config.php, scroll down a bit, you'll see that there's a subclass prefix option, but usually just you might want to leave it as is and create the class with that prefix name and extend that CI form validation class. So just to show you that this is working properly, I'm going to create a test function here that says testing the extended form validation library. And just like before, we're going to load this library. I'm going to create a function form, and this load library. And now we can call the test function. So there's no name change. We used to use this name before, but this time we're also going to call this new function named test, test/form, testing the extended form validation library. So that's, now there's a new method inside the form validation class. Well, this this subclass is now being used. And it comes with all the functionality of the parent class, obviously. So this is an extension. Now let's do something useful and add a useful functionality to this class. I want to add something to check the strength of a user input password. So for example, if the password contains only numbers or if it's too short, etc., we don't want to accept it. We just say the password is not strong enough, and I'll add a scoring system. So all of that custom stuff will need to have some code. Uh, we have to write code specific to handle all of this, and that's going to be part of this new form extended form validation class. Um, so let's just create the form first before doing all that. I'm just going to, oops, I'm just going to create a view. Now we have covered the form validation um, before, so I'm not going to go into much detail about how form validation works. And I'm going to use some form helper functions. When the form validation library is loaded, the form helper is also loaded automatically. So I can use these functions without having to explicitly load the form helper. But just to be sure, you might want to do that too. So the validation library also gives us this validation errors function and these enclosing tags we provide. So let's just create a username and password basic form input, the field's name, and just here something for getting the value after the form submitted. Um, well, this gets, once the form is submitted, it re-inputs that submitted value into the input field. Anyway, we have covered this stuff before, so I'm just going to type it in. Form password doesn't need a second parameter, and a submit button. Echo. And the form is closed, and this is just a basic form. I'm going to load it from the controller. This load view test form. Now set. Oh, so supposed to be set value. I'm sorry. Okay, here's our form. It submits to form submit, which we haven't created yet, as I put it here. So I'm going to write that function. And that will just say success, and well, after creating the user. If you handle that and forward somewhere else, but before that you have to check the form validation stuff. So to do that, we have to load the library again from this function. You could also load it from the constructor or from the autoloader, but I'm just going to load it again real quick and set some rules. So as you remember, the form validation library has the set rules function, and that lets you set rules on every form field that you want to validate. So the username is, let's say, required alphanumeric and has a minimum length of 6, And let's add another one for password. This is also required. It doesn't have to be alphanumeric. Um, so far so good. If I submit this, it will give me well, I have to check if I have to check for the validation to run. So it will return false. This run function will return false if one of these rules don't satisfy. And in that case, I will load the form again, and the form has the proper function for displaying the errors. Otherwise, just do success. Now let's try again. Okay, they are required. If I put something short, like 5 characters, the username field must be at least 6 characters. So if I put 6 characters and 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, very simple password. It passes the test and says success. So let's say we don't like the password 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and we want to check for the password strength. As I mentioned before, we're going to add this functionality to the new form or extended form validation class. So let's say we want to have a rule called strong pass, and I'm going to pass a number here. And the reason I'm passing a number is I require a password strength of 3, and that I will explain. It's based on a scoring system that I'm going to write. So in that scoring system, if it scores at least 3, then it will pass. Otherwise, it will give an error. So this is not part of the form validation class, obviously. So we're going to add this, and now this is going to connect a little closely with the existing form validation class. This I know from using it before and studying it before. When the form validation rules, when it encounters a rule, let's say it's called this strong underscore pass, the library itself will try to call a function called strong pass. So same name as that rule. And it will also pass it 2 parameters. The first one will be the value of the input, and it will pass another optional parameter that comes from these square brackets. If there are square brackets, like the minimum length rule, it will come as a second parameter. So it's a good thing to know how the library already works before you try to extend it, because some of these inner workings of it affect how you're going to extend it. So I know that this method is going to be called automatically already. And so let's see. In this new strong pass method, I'm going to say this is going to return true or false. That's how these form validation rules work. And I'm going to keep a score. Let's say score equals 0. I'm going to add a few conditionals that increment the score if they are met. And at the end, if the score is less than the passed number, which is 3 in this case, that comes as the second parameter. If it's less than that, I return false. Otherwise, return true. So in the middle here, I have to do some calculations. Let's say if the password contains a number, so we can do it with regular expressions here, \d checks for any digits, and value is the input. So if it contains any digits, increase the score. Also, we want to do the same thing for regular characters. A through Z. So if it contains a normal character, also increment the score. So if it contains both, we have a score of 2 already. And if it contains a character that's not a number or a letter, so it could be a special character like exclamation point, dollar sign, percent sign, etc. Those make passwords stronger. So I like those, so I want to increment the score on those as well. So we can add one more rule for checking the length, and let's say the length of 8 or more is good. In that case, add another point. So I have a minimum of 0, maximum of 4, and I'm testing to get a score of at least 3. That makes the password strong enough for me. Well, you can make a more sophisticated scoring mechanism, but this is just a good way to demonstrate. So as we did it before with the foo class here, we had the CI variable and we had to do it get instance. Now, if I'm going to need that again, but in the base class, if you look at the old form validation class, they already have done the same thing. There's the CI, and they do this CI get instance. That's already done in the constructor. So when I extended it, I don't have to do it again. So I can already access that as this CI. And I'm going to access it because I want to set the error message for this rule. The default error message when this rule fails, the strong pass rule. And it's going to say the whatever the form name is, which will be %s will be the placeholder for that, the form field, and it's not strong enough. So that's going to be the error message, and I think this looks good. Now we can test this. Now this was giving a success. I'm going to try the same input that was 1 2 3 4 5 6 for the password. Now I get the password is not strong enough. So I can do ABC 1 2 3 should get a score of 2. It's still not good enough. So if I do something really random with numbers in it and long enough, then I hit it and I get a success. So as you can see, you can add really custom form validation rules like this, and then they become usable across your application. And this is just one example of extending one of the core libraries. As I said before, this gives you unlimited flexibility when you can extend any class, add any class, add your own helpers, your own libraries, extend the existing libraries. This will make the framework even stronger. So you can also go to Codeigniter wiki. That's codeigniter.com/wiki, and here you can see user submitted, contributed libraries, and you can find what other people have done to improve this framework. So this is a great way to expand the framework, and I hope you liked the tutorial, and I'll see you next time. Bye.